In the past few videos, we went through a few visual effects tricks to achieve a Back to the Future effect. We animated a Cybertruck, we animated its tires, we made it fly around and land. We even added this cute little flag from Back to the Future. And today is going to be the last video. I'm going to show you how you can make those particle simulations and the smoke simulations for the landing to give your visual effects this extra Sup you phonies, how's it going? Welcome to another video. Today is gonna be very exciting. We're gonna do this whole landing thing where the smoke, the dust, and the particles is gonna be blowing around, and I'm gonna show you a few different ways to do that. So depending on your computer setup and ambition, you can achieve that from home. Let's go. So we're gonna use a few different softwares today, but mostly Blender. So once you open up Blender, this is basically what it looks like. For you, you probably have a cube. I usually start my scenes with a person, so I have something for scale references. Now, first what we need is a scene. I'm not gonna walk you through again how to make a scene. I'm just gonna do it real quick, but I feel like this time I'm gonna do it a little different because I've done it a few times now. I'm gonna use a Maluch. It's an old Fiat which drove everywhere around where I'm from Poland, so I wanted to make a Maluch land like a DeLorean and Back to the Future in my hometown Rybnik. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and I'm gonna catch you guys in a time lapse estimated 10 seconds. Let's go. Alright, I just made my little scene out of an image. So like I said, this is my hometown Rybnik. This is the Rybnik. This is where you go do your shopping and hang out with friends and stuff like that. If you had any friends, of course. And now I'm gonna implement the Maluch, and I'm gonna see you in another 10 seconds. Let's go. Great, my scene is pretty much done. Of course I need to refine a few things, but just for tutorial purposes I'm gonna go ahead and start with the actual simulations. So this is my little car here, so I need to animate it, so it's gonna be like maybe like starting from here and starting to land until here. That's all we need. So great, now we're gonna start working on those cool simulations. So there's a few different things you can do, and you can even combine a few methods. I'm gonna start with the paid method where it's not free, using EmberGen. So we're switching to EmberGen right now. For everybody who doesn't know what EmberGen is a GPU based simulation software where you can make fire, smoke, all kinds of cool simulations just like this one, and this one in particular is the exact one I was using for my Back to the Future animation. So on the right here you can see my simulation setup, like all the nodes which are important. To be fair, only these here, not this one is off too. Alright, so from all those nodes here, only these four are very important, and I'm gonna explain to you how they actually work. So everybody who understands nodes, plug in all those information into each other. So what we have here is a emitter. Just like in Blender with simulations, you have something where the smoke is going to come out of, and you can have two different types of emitters. You can have a volume, which is for like a constant smoke coming out. You use a volume. If you wanted like one burst, one explosion or something like that, then you would use particles, and that's what that would look like. You can see it's just more like particly. I could even use both, but in that case I was just using the volume. Okay, I hope that is clear what volume does. Now into the volume I have a shape plugin, a shape primitive, which is a cylinder. So basically a big cylinder on the ground, like a little further away from the ground, because I also have a force line which basically blows this smoke into the z-axis, like just down. So if it was completely on the ground, and that wouldn't work, so I just have it a little hovering over the ground. You can see it like here where it is, like right here. It's a little hovering over the ground, like half a meter or so. So it's just blowing from this into the ground. That's how I get all this turbulence here. And then of course I have my simulation node, and in here you can set up your domain size, your simulation, how fast your simulation goes, even like wind forces, like force fields, you can add them in here, which I have a little bit of wind chaos. And if you look at it, if I increase this number, there's just way more chaos, and if I decrease this number, there's just less chaos. And as you can see, everything is pretty much in real time, which is super cool in EmberGen. Again, this video is not sponsored by EmberGen or anything, but it could be. But I recently started using that, and it's very cool to see simulations like this in real time, and then you can add them in Blender. How do we add them in Blender? We make an export VDB node. So under volume processing, you just see this VDB, you just drag it out and make an export VDB node, which looks like this. And here it's very simple. You just export, you choose your frame rate from where to where you want to export this, your folder, and also in case you would have any flames or fire, you can have that here too. We don't, we only have the density of the smoke, so I'm just going to use this here. And then you export this, and that usually takes, depending on your computer, can take hours, sometimes minutes. And once you're back in here in Blender and your export is finished, just have Shift A and import a volume. This is a volume, import open VDB. Then you're gonna try to find your VDB, which is a basically like an image sequence. So you select them all with A, import VDB. Now you just have to find it, because usually it just turns out to be like super big. So when you scale it down, you can see, you can just bring it into the center of your scene. And of course in Blender it's like very slow, and right now I'm in the Eevee viewport. If I go into like the solid view, I can see a little better what's going on, but here you can see how the smoke is like blasted into the ground. And then you have to give it a material, because otherwise you're just not going to see it in cycles, or you're not going to see anything in cycles if you don't have a light on. So let's give our VDB a material. So under shader editor, either here you can make a window, or you go under shading. I have a window for that. Just have your VDB selected, hit on new, and under those settings, what I like to do is the anisotropy to 0.6. That means it's mostly visible when it's backlit. And the density, depending on how much of the smoke you actually want. So 0.1 usually works, 0.01 if you just want a little of that. So really depending on what you want. And again, scale it the size you need it. And once you render this, this is gonna look super cool. You can even adjust the color if you want it to be like more dirty, like the color of your environment. You can do that too. So yeah, but you don't have to stop there. Let's turn our VDB off real quick. Like if there was a nighttime scene, okay, and we had like super cool headlights, or even if it wasn't a nighttime scene, but what's a very cool effect, which you saw in my Cybertruck video, is if the headlights are very strong, then you're gonna see that in your smoke. So you just, if you have a car model, you just have to find the light. Either it has a light, or you have to make a light. Very often those car models, they have a light material. If they don't, it doesn't really matter. I can just, instead of this making glass, I could make it emissive. That would be the fast way. Emission node, suck, plug this into the surface instead. Now this is not glass anymore. No, it's a light. Let's make it blue, make it strong. Now when I bring my haze back, I'll bring the density up. You can see in the light how you can light up your haze or your VDB with your headlights, which is a very cool effect, in case that's something you want to do. And also another thing, what I did the same thing with the rims of the car. So when I go to the tire model, I'm going to go to the rubber. Actually no, I'm going to go to the metal, and right now you can see it's just, you know, silver, but instead of silver I could just make this emissive. Let's make it also bluish. Turn this up. Now when I turn the VDB back on, you can see there is some cool light coming on. Going on, and you could make this also flicker, like going back and forth a little, but you don't have to, because since there's like a simulated smoke, it doesn't have to flicker really. But yeah, that's very cool. And of course you can use any color you want, but usually like sci-fi blue always works. Yeah, what else can we do here? I'm gonna make this glass black because I don't want people to look in there, because I don't have a driver. And people in the comments are going to be like, oh, you don't have a driver. I'm not going to give them any ammo. Okay, that's basically it for the EmberGen way, the pricey way. EmberGen costs money, and not everybody has the means to buy it. So if you don't, I'm going to show you 2 more methods how you can do the same effect for free. So let's turn off this. Method number 2, which is a little more tedious, but it also works. If you download like assets, like smoke assets, you can import those as images. So when you go to Shift A, images as planes. If you don't have images as planes here, let's go to Edit, Preferences, and go to your add-ons. Type in images and turn this on. Save your preferences, and now you can use images as planes. You just have to find the right assets. There's lots of assets online for free. I'm sure you can find some. Like, just for example, I just imported this smoke asset, which is, this one is obviously not perfect, but just to show you as an example, you can just add this into your scene. Like you can copy it a few times into your scene, and then you're gonna have the illusion of having real smoke in there. In that particular case, this smoke asset did not come with an alpha, but that's not a big problem. I'm gonna show you the node setup, how you can make it look like it has an alpha, so you only see the smoke part. So in your shader editor, what you need is 2 nodes. You need the transparent node on top and the translucent node on the bottom. Now I hold Control, Shift, right click from one to another, and now I have a mixed shader node. Okay, so now I'm going to explain to you what I'm doing here. So the transparent node, the purpose of that is to make everything what's supposed to be transparent, which is all the black parts, I'm going to make transparent. Okay, that's what this node is for. The translucent node is everything what is gray, what has a color, is not going to be visible per se, but only visible if it's lit from the back. That's what translucency does. I could just make this one emissive. It would have the same effect, besides the fact that it would just make one emissive color and would not take the colors from the background, which is a very powerful effect if in like real environments, because that's what smoke does. If you have smoke going on, you can mostly just see the colors emitted by the light behind the smoke. So now we're gonna add the mix shader into the final output, and now the original video that goes into the factor. Now you can see this already. I have the smoke falling here, and it's just white right now, but depending on the color, let's say I would have a pink color behind it, this also becomes pink. When the light behind it is green, the smoke becomes green. That's why we use the translucent BSDF. Now when you have your smoke assets, you can just, first of all, you track them to your camera. So you go to constraints, object constraint, track to. Now you're going to select your camera you're going to render with. Now wherever the camera goes, when I turn the camera around, wherever the camera is going, this is where my plane is also going to be turning towards, which helps a lot when you do like effects like this. And now you can just Shift D, duplicate it a couple of times in your scene, different scales. You can flip some of them, and if you want to make them more visible, go on your shader editor and increase the volume by just 2 or so, then you can see the smoke better. But that would be a cheap way and a fast way, like very render efficient, to add smoke into like a landing scene like that. And remember, even though I'm showing you 3 different ways, doesn't mean that you only have to take one of them. You can use all of them together, and you should have some smoke assets behind him, some in front of him. Just with all of these, you can just make as many as you want. Okay, now I'm going to show you the third method, how to make a smoke simulation like that inside of Blender, and I'm gonna tell you up front, it's gonna be a tedious process, it's gonna be an annoying process. The result still can be good, but you do need a very good processor in your computer in order to work with those things. It's all doable, but practically it's just the same thing I did in EmberGen, but I have to do the same thing in Blender. I'm gonna show you how. So with Shift A, I'm just gonna make a new object. So now I just select it, and Blender makes it very easy for us. We just go on Object, Quick Effects, and Quick Smoke. Now it already made me a domain. So let me just switch to timeline, so I can always skip to the first frame. Now when I play this, like the domain is here right now, so let me just make the domain bigger. And with the domain, keep in mind you want to keep it as small as possible. Like every time you make it bigger, it makes it very hard and it takes longer to render, the quality is worse. So now we have a regular smoke simulation. It just looks like my car is smoking, which obviously is not what I want. So we just play with those settings a little. Let's see what we got. We're gonna go on my emitter here under physics. This is the fluid inflow. Now I can have an initial velocity, let's try that, of like -5. That should mean that it just blows down, and I think it does. So we're already getting closer. The problem is our domain, we have to make sure that the border collisions are on, at least for the bottom. So let's go to the first frame again. So now it just stops at the bottom, just like a regular ground would do, and that's pretty much what we want. And we can obviously add more things, and we need to work on our domain, of course. So here, same settings we had before, just 0.6 on this. Let's see what this smoke actually looks like in cycles right now. Yeah, it's not terrible. It's like the resolution is just very low right now. It's like on 32. If you want like a crisp simulation, just like in EmberGen, you have to increase this number by a lot, and we will, just for like a few frames, just so we can see. And here the density, basically the same settings we had before. It doesn't look terrible, especially let's crank this number up by 64. Let's go back to the first frame. Remember, every time you start over, you change something, you have to go to the very first frame to rebake your footage basically. Oh yeah, right now we can see our cylinder. We don't want to see it. So let's go back again. So in 64 it already looks better. It's not terrible. And now we can add some more action here. Let's say we want to add a force field. Let's do turbulence. Crank this number. If we crank this, we can already see what's going to happen. See, everything is just freaking out. So you just have to adjust those numbers. But it would be the same thing in EmberGen, but faster. See, this is still too high. Let's do 10. Still too high. It's interesting because the strength is always so different when you work with different kinds of simulations. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Yeah, and there's a few more settings where we can adjust. So once I'm ready to render, I would crank this number to like 200 or so. 256 usually should be enough. But what else do we have in the settings? We can add dissolve, which basically makes your smoke dissolve after a period of time. I'll always turn this on in slow and around 200 frames for this particular scene, because the entire thing is like 250 frames long. So yeah, it dissolves. Whatever gets created on the very first frame is going to be dissolved by frame 200. That's how it works. Noise I usually don't touch because it just slows down the render. Fire, in case you do have fire in your scene or you want fire, you could turn this on, but for that you would need to turn on your cylinder. Under flow type you also use fire and smoke, and then that's what it would look like in case you do want some fire in your scene. But of course we don't want this, so let's switch it back. Let's go on our cylinder. Instead of fire and smoke, we only want smoke, and there we are. So now once you think all your settings are good, crank this number to something high, 256. I don't think you need more. Go down to your cache, click on type all and save before, and now bake. Now you can see how long it's going to take. It takes around 1.2 seconds per frame, I would say. So for like 250 frames, it would take around 3-4 minutes or so. For my case, if your computer is better or worse, obviously those numbers are going to change a lot. So this is like something you have to figure out for yourself, how much time you want to spend on, you know, baking all that. Because the problem is also, once this is baked and something is going to be wrong with it, then guess what? You have to bake it again. That's why EmberGen is like so beautiful. When I look at this, like I can change anything I want in here. Like let's say I go on my primitive, let's start over, and I'm gonna just move it around. Like I can see all of this in real time, and that's incredible. Like to do this in Blender is just not possible. But again, I'm not sponsored by EmberGen, but it's really, really good stuff, and I'm very happy that I started working with it. Now you can see I have a few frames rendered, and one more thing in my settings here, you can turn on adaptive domain. So that, just make sure that you free your simulation first. If you click on adaptive domain, it's gonna just be the size as you need, and never bigger the size that it is now, but also it starts smaller when you render this or when you bake it. So let's bake it one more time. So that definitely is gonna save you some render time to use adaptive domain. Definitely good stuff. Okay, those are the three methods how you can make smoke simulations, or use smoke simulations for like a landing of a plane, or in that case a balloon. But there is also one more thing you can do, which is going to enhance the whole effect by actually having particles on the ground being pushed away by the car, which is super cool, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So first of all, what kind of particles are we going to use? I'm just gonna make my own little, let's call them rocks or sand. It's not really sand, it's like just little pieces. And I'm just gonna use a particle emitter, put them on the ground, and then with a force field coming from the car, I'm gonna attach this force field to the car. It's just gonna be blown away, and I'm gonna show you how to do that right now. Now, first of all, let's turn off our domain so we can actually work faster. First of all, we need a particle emitter, and we're just gonna make one right now. So with Shift A, mesh, plane, I'm gonna bring this plane over my scene, scale it up a little, apply the scale. Now go on your particle settings and add particles. Okay, the thing is, we only want particles emitted on frames negative, let's say 20. It's probably going to be lower than that, but it's going to be around that. So 20 and negative 19. So this is where we're going to have particles emitted. And also we need our ground here to be a collision object for our particles. So when we go on our object here, make sure that you apply the scale, otherwise it's not going to work. And you just use this as a collision. So under physics, click on collision, and that's usually all you have to do with that. So now when we look at this, our particles are going to be not going to be hanging out on our ground, because we need those particles to live longer. The lifetime is too short. So the lifetime has to be 270 because we start 20 frames earlier. So let's do 280. So right now they're bouncy. We don't want them to be bouncy. We just want them to stick, basically. So I'm gonna go back on my my collision object and turn on damping. And let's also bring our particles a little lower so we don't have to wait that long. Now they're not bouncy anymore. Awesome. And you see that they're moving a little. That is because our turbulence is still on, and that's fine. They can interact with each other. Cool. Definitely gonna move this a little further. You can make it even a little bigger. Apply the scale. So now we need another force field. I'm gonna attach this to the car. So I'm gonna go to the car, like right underneath, like right here. I'm gonna with Shift right click, have my 3D cursor right here. Shift A. I'm gonna make a force field, and we can just use force. And also let's make sure to parent this force field to the car, or the empty of the car, so it moves with the car. Otherwise it would defeat the purpose a little. So Control P, there you go. Now we can see all those particles are getting pushed away, but a little too hard, way too strong. So we're gonna go back to the force field and make it just one. Turn on absorption and gravitation with the first frame and see what's happening. Not enough. Let's turn this to 5. See, now we can see how cool it's getting pushed away by the car. And right now in my scene I'm not going to see it probably, unless I can actually have my camera a little higher, that would be fine too. But here we're going to see how the particles are getting pushed away, and that's exactly what we want. Now obviously those particles, they don't look like anything, they're just halos, so we have to create that. So either you're going to make your own particles, or you use like objects like coffee mugs and leaves, like stuff which could be in the scene. Just for tutorial purposes, I'm just going to make my own. An icosphere, subdivision on 1. Let's bring this icosphere like behind the camera somewhere here where we're not going to see it. I'm just going to give it a new material. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. I'm just going to give it a diffuse, give it like something like gray-ish. So that's what the material looks like. Now in my particle emitter, I'm going to go on particles, and then under render, which is right here, instead of halos I want to render an object. And guess what? This object. So now I can see when I turn up the scale randomness, I have all those little rocks lying on the ground, and they're gonna get pushed away. One more thing you want to do is like turn on rotation and turn up those numbers, because you want this to be as dynamic as possible. And if you want more randomness, just create more different objects. I can just copy this and maybe go in edit mode, make this a little different, you know. I can even scale this entire thing down. So now I have 2 objects, but in order to use 2 objects, I have to put them into a collection. Let's call it particle collection. Now under my particle settings, under render, instead of object, I want to render a collection. And under collection, particle collection. I just made this. So now it has different rocks. If you do want to use like other objects, let's say a coffee. It's a coffee mug. I'm going to just put it right here. And now there should also be coffee mugs on the ground. But make sure those objects you're going to import are also going to be in the particle collection, otherwise they're not going to show up. Now rocks and coffee mugs floating around. And when you put all those effects together, the smoke planes, the smoke cars from the beginning, a simulation either from EmberGen or created in Blender, and those particles, and with all the lighting, this is what you're gonna get. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know, because I'm not making those videos for fun. I'm making those to help you guys. So make sure to ask me those questions and we can figure out your scenes together. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video. Doo-doo.